The Nintendo Switch, such an iconic machine. And it is arguably Nintendo's most successful at that. And it has quite the impressive library. But you know, not everyone necessarily wants to go and play like Mario or a Zelda or a Metroid. Some of us would really love to play an F-Zero, but where's it at, Nintendo? Come on, get Sega on the phone. Let's get this. Let's get it. Do it. Make it happen. Anyways, that's not really why I'm here today. So, effectively, I think some of the coolest games on the system are actually niche, random games by smaller developers. And I'd kind of like to go over a few of them today since, you know, I'm just biding my time waiting for, you know, Trails in the Sky first chapter. I'm not going to lie. I've been very excited for that, waiting for that. Unfortunately, I'm not a big enough YouTuber to have access to a review code. Would have been really cool, but it's not going to happen. All that aside. Yeah, the Switch 2 is a phenomenal handheld. I feel like I've said my piece on that a few times now. And basically, your entire Switch library is on Switch 2, which means all of the really awesome niche games that were on the Switch 1 that, you know, are pretty underrated are still on the Switch 2 and are still very underrated. So without further ado, let's take a look together, shall we? As you can see, my library on my Switch 2 is quite expansive. And while I would really like to include the Falcom games on this list, I really don't think I should because I've already done a very significantly lengthy video on it. That being said, the Nintendo Switch and, you know, by proxy Nintendo Switch 2 are home to some of my favorite RPGs of all time, including the Xenoblade Chronicles franchise. I mean, there's 4 entries on the Switch 2 at this point in time that you can go out and play, and they're all pretty awesome in their own right. Like, you know, you don't really get big RPGs like this all the time, at least not from Nintendo. So these games are very special. I don't really consider them niche though, because after 2, these games pretty much became the mainstream, I feel. At least more mainstream than they were before, when it was just the original game on the Wii and then, you know, Xenoblade Chronicles X on the Wii U. If any of you were there for that one, I was. I love that game in every format. But anyways, these games are awesome. They do not really qualify for what I consider to be niche. So let's get into this list with the first proper niche title. Look, I know I'm cheating with this one. I know Final Fantasy is not niche in the slightest. However, I do feel like Final Fantasy XII is definitely underrated and always seems to be one that people just don't talk about. However, I will still acknowledge that Final Fantasy as a franchise is not niche at all, like in the slightest. So I'm not gonna really dwell on this one too much. I think if you enjoy RPGs, you kind of owe it to yourself to play this game. I do believe it to be a bit of a masterpiece. Anyways, let's move on to another game that's actually niche, and that is Klonoa Fantasy Reverie series. So this is actually 2 games in one. It's the original Klonoa remake, and also probably my favorite of the 2, Klonoa 2 Lunatea's Veil. English, it's a language I speak. Anyways, yeah, the original game is, it is what it is. It's a pretty basic platformer with some decent mechanics to it. Basically, they grab enemies to access like a double jump, but you can also throw them as a projectile to destroy other enemies and objects. It's good fun. I personally did not really grow up with this entry, however, Klonoa 2 is definitely in my top 5 platformers of all time. This is a PS2 era game that I grew up with, and it honestly is one of my favorites. I played it quite a bit at my parents' old house. I remember very fondly sitting on a beanbag in front of a CRT of all things playing this game. I just think it's really awesome. It's got pretty good boss fights. The levels are really well done as well. But there's also the super iconic waterboarding levels, I guess is what I would call it. You're on like a hoverboard going through like streams and rivers and stuff like that. It's a lot of fun. This game just rocks. And on Switch 2, it performs practically perfectly. I want to say it's 60 FPS. I rarely noticed any frame dips here and there. I'm sure it probably happens during certain things, but overall performance is just phenomenal here on Switch 2. So yeah, I love this game a lot. Let's move on into something a little different though. Mad Rat Dead. So this is a fusion of a platformer and a rhythm game. It's got a similar visual cue system to something like Crypt of the Necrodancer, but this game is very cool and unique in that each of your buttons do a different platforming thing. You have your jump, you have a dash, you have a drop down, and then you have a charge up, like a wind up ability. This game's really neat, and it starts off relatively simple with a beat that you can follow pretty well, but then it gets into some really crazy, fun, wacky rhythm, and just kind of goes off from there. This game's a lot of fun, and I highly recommend it if you are into rhythm games or just a platforming fan in general. This game it's just good fun. It's pretty simple. I don't usually see it go on sale that often, but if you can, definitely get it on sale. I think it's just a really good time. This is one I actually have a physical collector's edition for. It came with a little like audio tape. It's kind of neat. It runs phenomenal on Switch 2, thankfully. Switch 1 had some frame rate issues, but you know, not here. And the soundtrack slaps. Next up we have Theatrhythm Final Bar Line. So this is a Final Fantasy themed rhythm game. It's actually got an arcade version that's pretty cool, but I personally have never really gotten that much time on with it. However, there are home versions that have existed for years now. Like we've got it on 3DS, and you know, now PS4, PS5, and Nintendo Switch. The Nintendo Switch version had some flaws for a while that have since been remedied by the Switch 2 hardware. It's super nice. This game, it's pretty basic, but it's pretty fun too. Like, I don't need to go on too long on this because, as mentioned before, Final Fantasy is not that niche anymore. But this is a pretty good rhythm game. I do recommend it if you are a fan of the franchise. With that being said, I think we should start looking into some more actually truly niche gems. Square Enix. Wait a minute. I thought I said, oh, never mind. This is pretty niche. So, The World Ends With You Final Remix. The cool thing about this game is that on the original Switch hardware, you would have to reset the cursor like all the time. But here on Switch 2, the Joy-Con 2 actually does a phenomenal job just going to center like when you point at center. So you'll notice here I'm putting it back on Neku pretty consistently, despite whipping the thing around like crazy. Yeah, this is honestly one of the best ways to play this game, in my opinion, is on the Switch 2, just because the Joy-Con for motion control is so much better. Previously, this is a game you would have to play like handheld mode to play with a touchscreen, just because it was super annoying having to reset the dang thing. But on Switch 2, that problem is thankfully alleviated. And this is ultimately a game that I do believe to be well worth your time. I have a lot of fun with it, especially on the original DS version. The music and the story are just phenomenal, and the characters are great. And moving on into its sequel, this is where things get really cool. So this game runs 60 FPS on the Nintendo Switch 2, which is awesome in and of itself, which is pretty important considering this is an action RPG. The battles all feel super smooth and responsive, which is really important for a game like this. Much like the first game, I think the music and characters and story are pretty good, and I do think if you are a fan of RPGs or action RPGs, or you know, you're interested in stuff that takes place in Japan, you know, like if you're a Persona head or something like that, this is definitely worth a look. I really do like both of these games, and I don't think they're quite as appreciated as they should be. Speaking of games that are underappreciated, I've got a trilogy here that I absolutely adore that I just don't. Literally anyone I talk to, they don't know what I'm talking about when I say Etrian Odyssey. Now this is a cool one because I actually do have a physical copy of this. It's got all 3 of the original DS Etrian Odyssey games, which if you don't know what they are, they're effectively first-person dungeon crawlers with a completely customizable party system. It's a lot of fun. Effectively, you have to draw your own map. It's grid-based, very classic style RPG, harkening back to stuff like wizardry, and it certainly carries the difficulty with it. I do think this game is for probably the more hardcore gamer, honestly, especially if you're into old school RPGs, but I would not let that dissuade you from at least giving it a shot. I do think these are actual, like, just classics in the grand scheme of things, these games truly are something special that, you know, came from a really cool era, the DS era, when RPGs like this felt like a dime a dozen, honestly, but I think these are the ones that did it best. And since this is a CRPG style game, you know, with grid movement and all that, I think this is a perfect segue into our next game, which is a much darker, more depressing game. It is none other than Undernauts, Labyrinth of Yomi. So while Etrian Odyssey was the fantasy, medieval, sword and sorcery kind of RPG, this is more of a realistic world RPG that takes place in Japan. Effectively, a big structure appeared that people are dungeon crawling for materials to make money. So you, in the beginning, create your character, and you are joined up with a party of underage people as well as very young women, and are sent into the dungeon where you are unceremoniously wiped out, and all of the women and children you were with are eaten by a monster. Wow, that's definitely a start. Outside of that, I mean, obviously, thematically, this game is very dark, but it is, at the end of the day, a pretty basic CRPG style game where you're just kind of dungeon crawling around and fighting monsters. It really does play into its themes really well, though. I do think it's pretty neat. If you are big into CRPGs that are of this gameplay style, I think you'll really enjoy it. And if you're really into like dark horror settings, this game has that in spades as well. And I think we need to clean off a little bit. Let's go to a completely different genre, shall we? Of course, if you know me, I'm pretty big on shmups. I grew up with arcade machines all around me, so arcade shmups like this are just my bread and butter. So we're looking at Eschatos. This game is incredible, and actually comes bundled with a few other games. You got Judgment, Silver Sword, and Cardinal Sins. So Judgment Silver Sword's a pretty neat one. It's basically just like a very simple speedrunning for high score kind of shooter, where you are defeating waves of enemies as fast as you can and getting scored based on your timing. Cardinal Sins it's pretty much the same thing at the end of the day, with a slightly different background. Still pretty neat, just for the sake of having it, you know, in this collection. The real meat and potatoes here, though, is of course the titular Eschatos. So I love this game quite a bit. It's one of the more unique shmups that has come out in the last like decade or so. I actually think this is older than a decade at this point. Holy cow, am I getting old? I think I'm getting old. So anyways, this game has a killer soundtrack and a very simplistic graphical style that I think just works. I really like this sweeping city in the background, and just visually it's just really neat. You're fighting against big old UFOs, and it's pretty fast. You have two shot types, but you can also hold both shot buttons to do like a little shield to protect yourself from projectiles. Overall, it's just really neat. I highly recommend it if you are interested in shmups. It's not that hard of a game, to be honest. I think this would be a perfect starting point for anyone to get into like bullet hell style games. I know it's not a bullet hell, but it's a really good place to start if you're interested in the genre. Are we feeling better about ourselves now? Are we... Ooh. Oh, wait. Oh, sweet. I get to talk about another Kotaro Uchikoshi game. Love that. If you've seen my Tukio Games video, I talked about this a little bit. But this is AI the Somnium Files, or I, you know, based on how they use the word eyeball when you see the word AI ball. It's just one of those things. You gotta understand, the Japanese games sometimes just do that. I don't make the rules. This is a very cool game. It's a kind of first-person detective style game where you play as Kaname Date and you are solving a murder and things happen, and I don't want to spoil it at all because I think you should just play it. And yeah, I think that's all you're gonna get out of me on this one. On Switch 2, this game runs at 60 FPS, which is way better than it did on the original system. And yeah, it's just a good time, and the sequel runs just as well, so I highly recommend you check out both of them. Unfortunately, the resolution's a bit low on this, but I still think it's highly enjoyable either way, especially in handheld mode. Alright, so let's kind of go into another detective game, shall we? Listen, if you knew what this was by that little guitar intro, then we can be friends. So Deadly Premonition is a bizarre game, and it's a beautiful game, but it's also a crazy game and a really stupid game. It is incredibly poorly made, but it's also a mastercraft. I want you to analyze this scene with me. So we have Francis York Morgan, FBI Special Agent. He's a Chad, but don't mind that. He's smoking a cigarette while talking on the phone in depth about, of all things, Tom and Jerry, but he's also typing on a laptop, researching a string of murders that, you know, he's been working on in the past, all tied to some mysterious drug or substance. But, I mean, this is where it just gets wild, right? So he's doing all of this at one time while driving in the rain in the countryside, right? And if this situation wasn't just completely stupid, it gets better. So yeah, he changed hands. You probably noticed that. Imagine driving and you're juggling all this stuff, right? Like all at one time. Like, this is just silly. This is insane. And then he pulls this out and he's like, oh look, these puppies are making me go to another town in the boondocks again. It's like, buddy, eyes on the road. Like, what the heck? But what comes next is quite brilliant, actually. So, you know, he's running, his cigarette runs low. He needs a new one, right? So he's reaching over, he's in the glove box. He's still driving down this country road in the rain, like a crazy psychopath, right? And he pulls out his box of cigarettes, right? And so he's still talking to us, the player, as if we are this character named Zach, right? Notice the box says police on it. Okay, that's one thing, right? So this is where it gets even funnier. He pulls out a lighter with a no smoking symbol on it. Like, who came up with this? And he's still driving, right? He's trying to do all this while still driving. It's not working. He's about to get in an accident. He goes off the road. What happens next? You have to hear it for yourself. I'm going to just play the audio raw because it is the funniest thing ever. You heard that right. Squirrels that make monkey noises. Yes, this is definitely a video game. What makes this video game in particular very special is that it's actually like half survival horror with, I shouldn't really call it survival horror. You have infinite handgun ammo and enemies die pretty fast. There's even a lock-on system, which is kind of neat. But the free aim is really generous as well. But yeah, it's like half survival horror game, kind of like Resident Evil-ish. And then it's also like a straight up open world detective game with time where you have to actually be at places on time or else you won't be able to do the things you need to. And there's like deadlines and stuff. It's really cool. I think this game is fantastic. It's obviously inspired by the show Twin Peaks, which if you haven't seen that, you need to. That show's phenomenal. I love it so much. The original show, not the movie and not the reboot. The original Twin Peaks. So dang good. Francis York Morgan and Agent Cooper they both love their coffee. What can I say? One thing about this game that's kind of wild is the driving. The driving is jank and does not work very well, and you will crash a lot because if you're going too fast, turning actually, I mean, it's kind of like real cars. Like if you're going way too fast and you try to turn like a sharp turn, you're gonna probably get into a wreck. So you actually have to slow down if you want to get places safely. So it's kind of interesting, but also like super jank, and you will go off-road like all the dang time. All the while, Francis York Morgan, FBI Special Agent Francis York Morgan, talks to you about real movies, and it's really weird. And I love it so much, and I guess there's just the right amount of people out there who agree with my sentiment because they made a sequel. And it's okay. It runs about how you'd expect. It's 60 FPS some of the time on Switch 2, not perfect. I think the first game is way better. And yeah, granted, neither of these games are perfect or really objectively good, but I enjoy them for what they are, and I think if you were like me and enjoy a show like Twin Peaks, you probably could find some enjoyment here as well. Maybe we should move on to something a little less jank. Yeah, we're going to talk about Grimgrimoire once more. So this is a Vanillaware game, and you'll see here their logo, their beautiful logo. When you see that, you know you're in for a quality treat. So this is actually one of 3 Vanillaware games I'm going to be discussing, and this one's kind of cool. It's like part visual novel, part side view Age of Empires gameplay, where you effectively have like little elf minions that you use to gather resources so you can, you know, upgrade other like resources and then, you know, make units and the like, and you command them around like an RTS. It's a neat game with a, you know, classic Vanillaware aesthetic that just kind of works all the time. Like, seriously, the game's great to look at. I do like it a lot, and on Switch too, it runs very well. You know, as much as I like this game, I prefer the other 2 that I'm going to discuss quite a bit more, but I have to say that this game definitely deserves your attention if you are into, you know, like, just cool Japanese games. Anyways, let's move on. This is, in my opinion, one of Vanillaware's best games. It's definitely one of their best looking, and the soundtrack is phenomenal as well. I mean, just look at it. Like, all you gotta do is look at it, and you can tell that this was very lovingly made. Vanillaware is known for their graphics, like just being hand painted and just very, very nice to look at. But this one in particular just really does it for me. So this is basically a semi-visual novel style game. I'd say more like an adventure game. You do walk around and like have to interact with characters and bring up specific topics and things like that when you're doing the story segments. But the cool thing is that this game is actually split up into a second segment, which is purely like a kind of RTS style of gameplay, where you're effectively piloting these giant mechs against kaiju, and it doesn't really look like much from like at a first glance, but trust me, this game, like, once it starts going off in combat, it really goes off. Like, it becomes just a visual feast of particle effects, and you feel like you're sitting in a command chair, like just watching over a really epic mech fight. And I know that sounds really dumb when you're looking at this, but you just gotta trust me on this one. This is a 10 out of 10 Vanillaware game for me. Probably right up there with Muramasa the Demon Blade, honestly. Just super good, and the story is really intriguing as well. I highly recommend it. Just like I highly recommend this next game. Oh yeah, Unicorn Overlord. This is yet another banger out of Vanillaware. It's kind of like, it reminds me of, I think it's Ogre Battle 64, I want to say, where it's kind of like a semi-RTS game, but, you know, when you engage in combat, it plays out like a turn-based affair, where predominantly the choices made that matter are just like your party arrangements per unit. Obviously, I don't want to spoil this game for anybody, so I'm only showing, and you probably noticed this, I'm only showing introductions to these games, like little prologue segments and stuff like that, because I genuinely believe that people should play these games. Like, Vanillaware makes good stuff, and this is up there as one of the best games in the last, like, decade to me. Like, genuinely a gem that I feel like it got some attention, but I don't think it got enough attention. I think this is probably the least niche of the 3 Vanillaware games that I've mentioned, because, you know, it did get some attention from stuff like, you know, Nintendo Directs and stuff like that. But I fully, wholeheartedly recommend you go into this one blind, because it's just that good. Like, this is such a good looking game, again with another phenomenal soundtrack, and just a story that I think, you know, anyone can get behind. So yeah, I cannot gush enough This is just a great game, and I do think that you should try it. And I believe there should be a demo. I might be wrong on that though. I'll check. Just verified. There is a demo. You should definitely check it out. And that leads us into Astria Ascending. So I kind of put this one here because it does vaguely remind me of Vanillaware just a tiny bit. I feel like they were definitely inspired by Vanillaware. But this is a side-scrolling game that is also a turn-based RPG, trying to replicate some of the classics in a way. Soundtrack is worked on by a few people, but one of the people that stands out to me is Hitoshi Sakamoto, who, if you know me, he did Radiant Silvergun, Vagrant Story, Final Fantasy Tactics, Final Fantasy XII. Yeah, all good stuff. Phenomenal soundtrack work by Sakamoto-san. So I, was mostly drawn to this game just because I thought it was going to be a weird collector's item, being as niche as it is. I hardly know anyone that knows what this game is. And it's not a great game. I'm not going to say that it is. It's an okay game with a pretty interesting art style, I will say. And I will also say that it does get pretty challenging the later you get into it. If you're into more hardcore turn-based RPGs, this one, it'll probably scratch an itch for you, but I don't think if you're just, kind of casually into RPGs, you should try it because, yeah, it's definitely, it's got some rough edges. I'll put it that way. And speaking of rough edges, this next one I thought was going to be very rough. However, it surprised me a little bit. So this is a game I had almost no expectations going into a while ago when I tried the Steam version. But holy cow. At the time I was not anticipating that I was going to be playing a game that reminded me so much of Ys 3 The Wanderers from Ys, except like on crack. But here it is, Astlibra Revision. This side-scrolling hack and slash has some incredibly dark themes and is rated M for a few reasons that I will probably not show here. But, don't let that dissuade you. I think this is a masterpiece. It was made by one guy, which is crazy to me. Like, that's absolutely nuts that this was a creation of a singular individual. I mean, yeah, sure. The animations are not, like, super crazy, but once you get used to them, there's actually a lot of charm to them, and the soundtrack's really freaking good, too. When I first played this on Steam, I genuinely just had no idea what I was getting into at the time. I just saw it had an overwhelmingly positive review score, and it ended up being one of my favorite games of that year. I can't even remember when it came out, if I'm being perfectly honest. But it was definitely a special game that year for sure, and one that I would tell people was on my Game of the Year list for the year. Despite all of my friends looking at it and saying, man, this looks really dumb. Trust me, it is not. And on Switch 2, this game is absolutely phenomenal. I am showing Switch 2 footage here. It runs practically perfect. There's nothing I can complain about here. Just don't let the graphics, fool you. There's a lot of depth here that is just worth experiencing. And if you end up enjoying it, the sequel, well, it's not really a sequel. There's DLC for the game on Steam, but it's being sold as a standalone game on the eShop. It's like, I think $8 right now on sale. Absolutely worth looking into. It's basically a little side game where you play as a side character that, it's randomized dungeons, kind of a roguelike. Pretty neat. Definitely recommend checking it out if you enjoy the base game. And with that, that's all I have for today. So if you enjoyed watching, please consider liking and subscribing. I still cannot grasp why people ask for that. I feel like you should just have it happen naturally through people actually liking it and deciding they want to subscribe. That's besides the point. I still feel weird doing this, but yeah, please consider it. It really does help out a lot, and honestly, if you're at this point now, I love you. Thank you for watching. So, without further ado, have a wonderful morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are in the world, and I will see you next time.